Okay, music stop. Hello, welcome to Spindle City Straight Talk. I'm Chip.
And I'm Carlos.
And you still?
There I am.
There you okay. I thought your voice was reverberating off your cast or something.
Yeah, well, it's definitely something, and
Or somebody's squeezing your foot.
yeah. Well, before we get into the big news of the day, I definitely wanted to address the Brexit vote.
Yeah, we're worldwide now, and this is big news in the world.
Exactly, and the United Kingdom, the UK, England, Scotland, Ireland, they voted to exit the
Wales,
European Union.
Don't forget little Wales.
Yep, don't forget Wales.
They know you're here.
They know we're having a show. So they voted to leave the European Union, and this morning the Dow opened 500 points down. The cost of metals skyrocketed, and they're looking at the biggest doomsday scenario going. But this proves that the voters, the citizens, the taxpayers are fed up with our government. Not only here in Fall River, not only here in the United States, not only here in Massachusetts, but across the world. They're tired of it. This was focused, one of the major issues here was sovereignty of their country, keeping their borders closed, immigration. I think that's important because we're talking about that here in the United States all the time. Mm-hmm. About being able to control who comes into this country. And people say, oh, you can't do that, that's discriminatory. Well, guess what? England said, that's what? It's not. We're going to control who can come into our country, like it or not. And I think that's important. But when you look at these results, in England, to remain in the Union, only 46.6% wanted to stay in the. But across the world, they're tired of it. This was focused. Where is that from? One of the major issues. I'm like, where is that from? Wow.
That's you.
I know that was me about 30 seconds ago.
ago.
This is what happens with those live feeds, So you look at England, the country of England only wanted to stay in. 46.6% wanted to remain in. Meanwhile, Northern Ireland, 55.8% said we're going to remain in. Scotland, 62.0% we're going to remain in. Wales, 47.5% remain in. Then you move on to Cornwall. Okay? A lot of people wanted to stay, but guess what? The majority wanted to leave. And they wanted to leave to the point that they said no. 70% of the voters, 70% in the entire United Kingdom came out, boy, Fall River could do that. We'd have a change in Fall River. But it was a 51% vote to leave the European Union. And the referendum turnout was actually 71.8%, with more than 30 million people voting, the highest turnout at a UK-wide vote since 1992. 51% said, we're leaving the Union. And you know what? Congratulations to them. They're calling it English freedom. And I think it's important that we recognize the fact that independence not only comes in the United States, but it comes across the world.
Yeah, it's a little. It's not the coincidence or the irony of the fact that comes right on the heels of the Supreme Court, basically because of the political nature of the Supreme Court, tied at 4-4 about Obama's immigration policy, which is basically the same thing about certain states feel that they want to control their own borders, and this pathway for illegals is basically encouraging illegal aliens to come here, and that's their opinion. And regardless of what you think, the Supreme Court now, because they won't hear it because it's a 4-4. The fact is, it went back down to the lower court, which ruled against them. So that's gone too. So we see throughout virtually every aspect of government, we see this backlash from the people. The people throughout the world are sick and tired of being taxed and taxed and feed and getting absolutely nothing for it. And while the politicians just fiddle and take care of their friends, and big business gets richer, and the middle class evaporates, and the poor people get poorer. And this is a symptom of a pot that's boiling, and it's just about ready to boil over. So these are all symptoms, and I think the boiling point is in Fall River too. So.
Yeah, I'm just, my opinion is that this is going to be a domino effect for the other countries now. Because until now, everybody was working together. Now that one abandoned the boat, so the other one's going to realize we can do that too, and abandon our boat and be on our rules instead of being obeying everybody's rules. So, and I think this is going to be an effect in Portugal. They really never liked it, the fact that they changed to euros. From scooters to euros. That was a big impact, and people that live in Portugal, they still don't understand how euros works versus scooters. So I think that Portugal, I will not be surprised if Portugal tries to get out too.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. Go ahead.
You know, this is what we're seeing, though.
Yeah.
It's time for the taxpayer, it's time for the citizens, it's time for the voters to revolt. And we're advocates of voter revolt. And the revolt takes place at the ballot box. Or in some case, as in Fall River, at the courthouse.
Yeah, which segues us into the other thing. But before we do, I just want to make this statement. Just think about this, because we always talk about how the government creates these myths to justify their actions, and they tell half-truths, and this is what politicians do. But just look at this issue here. Businesses are always talking about, capitalism, and they should have the right to do this and do that. That they shouldn't be infringed upon. And yet, if you look at this, the European Union is basically socialism. They all got together, and they're working together because it's going to give them a profit. So when you look at it from that aspect, they should have remained independent and competed, and it's better for the people. But when they unite, they say it's better for them economically, it's better for Europe economically, when in reality it's better for them economically. And what happened in the stock market showed today that they're panicking because this is an issue. We can't always do what the politicians want, because they don't really care about us. And with that, we can segue into the local top news story. CJ, take it away.
That's the people trying to shut us up. On June 23rd, which wasn't too long ago.
Yesterday.
A 10 taxpayer group named as plaintiffs versus the City of Fall River and Mayor Jasiel F Correia in his official capacity. The action is seeking to void, invalidate, and prevent the execution of a 10-year contract between Easy Disposal and Recycling and the City of Fall River by the defendants, which contract has not been properly executed, which was not approved by the Fall River City Council, nor has it been appropriated for in violation of Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 31, and Chapter 40, Section 4, and in violation of the revised ordinances of the City of Fall River, Massachusetts, 1999 Fall River ordinances that apply to any contract that incurs liability to the City of Fall River. I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's about 10 pages long. But I will say this. This mayor did not look at any part of the law. All he saw was a provision in procurement which allows him to enter into contract without putting it out for an RFP. That's all that provision allowed for. It doesn't allow for him to enter into contracts that incur liabilities or anything else. And the law is very clear that a contract that is entered into that has a liability on the city, which, and the law says this, which does not
definitely
have an appropriation for it in the city budget, is illegal. And this mayor has screamed, ranted, and raved. He has acted like a child at times, and he's made it very clear to people that I'm the mayor, and what I say goes. It's very dictatorial. And, I'm not going to get into the nuances of the law, so we got to speak of this in generalities, but, this is something Fall River doesn't need. And my question is, how much more is it going to cost us now for this contract if it does get stricken down? Because guess what? They're seeking in this lawsuit financial remuneration. They want the legal fees paid for by the city, by the mayor. And this contract right now is only binding on the mayor because the city council hasn't funded it.
Yeah.
This is a very questionable situation for the city, and very questionable for our city council.
Well, I know there's going to be tremendous backlash with this. We're going to hear from the people, a lot of people who are saying, "Oh, this is not good. You're not letting them do." Well, let me just give you my perspective here. Even if you're in favor of privatization, and I've said long ago when this thing began on the show, I could not formulate a valid position because the numbers are so sketchy. This contract is so bad, a 10-year contract, and we've seen what happens, and the half-truths and misrepresentations that went along with this contract, them saying that New Bedford had a 10-year contract when in fact they have a 5-year contract with a renewal clause. That's not a 10-year contract. It's a 5-year contract with a renewal clause. So they're trying to push this under false pretenses. We're not sure about the cost. The early cancellation fees are astronomical. I mean, a court is going to decide this issue. But the taxpayer court, the court of what's good for the taxpayer, has already, as far as I'm concerned, has already rendered its decision. This contract is not good for the city of Fall River. We have seen so many contracts, whether it's with personnel or other things like Dominion, cost this city. And the reality is, everybody that's talking that wants privatization, regardless of what the consequences are, I remind you of something that you really got to understand. If this contract proves to be detrimental to this city down the road, the mayor's not going to pay for it. We are. Like we're paying for all the other follies, Dominion, and the 22 windows, and all the other things, that the health care changes for the city employees to give them inferior plans because the city can't handle money. This contract was poorly thought out. It's not in the best interest of the city. This is a contract that makes easy disposal. And this is the reason that I couldn't support this budget for many reasons. The health care issue that's being brought up, this contract, the fact that the mayor's given his department and people associated with it a 30% increase, when I don't see the priorities to the people of Fall River, a lot of pay raises for the 1%, as I said before. I have many reasons that I don't believe in this budget. But the reality is, this is one of the biggest pieces, because this piece could virtually cripple this city and put us in receivership at some point in time. This contract should not be entered into until it has been thoroughly examined and thoroughly costed out by people who we can trust, not our financial team, because they couldn't lead a one-man parade.
This is just getting to places further and further into bizarro world. I mean, I'm going to call Stan Lee to write us a comic book, because, this is how ridiculous this is all becoming. How many mayors is it going to take to learn trash will be your downfall? Mm-hmm. Okay? The easiest solution to this entire problem was given to this mayor, was given to the previous mayor. Effective July 1, 2015, previously, 2016 this time, the city of Fall River shall no longer engage in solid waste management services. All solid waste management shall be the responsibility of the property owner and must enter into private contracts for management of their waste needs. Failure to do so will result in significant fines issued by the Board of Health. End of story. There you go.
I said on this show 2 months ago that I didn't have my opinion yet about privatization. because I had questions, and until I got some answers. And I'm just going to speak as a taxpayer. As a taxpayer, I still don't have the questions. I don't have a plan. What this going to bring us into? What is the plan? What is the future of the trash if we go into a contract like this? And seeing the people that supposed to represent us, the city councils, not them having the questions. I'm only a taxpayer. I don't have to have the people answer my questions. But the people that are there to vote and to represent me, not having the questions answered, and at this point of the game that we are, a week away from a new year?
Yeah.
It's bizarre. And for that reason, I'm not supporting this contract. And just because of the fact that I still, as a taxpayer, and I'm going to be paying this bill, I don't have the answers for me to be paying for a bill.
Well, you're 100% right, but I gotta say something, Carlos. You said you're just the taxpayer. The taxpayer is the most important person in this equation. The Constitution of this state says at all times our elected officials and in all branches are answerable to us. The questions that you asked should have been answered thoroughly so you could support this, or we could all support it. But, to get back to what CJ said, how many mayors is it going to take before the city of Fall River enters into a contract that doesn't bite them in the ass? I don't know how many times have we heard we can't get rid of this person because they've got a buyout clause. They've got this. They've got that. We can't get out of our contract with easy disposal because it will bankrupt ourselves with the early termination fees. We can't go to a premium health care plan because we don't have enough money to pay the runoff claims, even though you're supposed to, and you had a fund for it. How many times? When are we going to get a mayor that writes a contract with somebody they hire that has a termination for cause agreement, clause, that has a termination for cause clause in it? When are we going to have a mayor that enters into contracts of short duration so if something happens, we can get rid of people without these gigantic fees? Isn't it ironic that the poor man, the working guy, always gets the shaft? Because I'll tell you something. It's illegal in the state of Massachusetts for public employees to enter into a collective bargaining agreement that exceeds 3 years. 3 years. And you know why that is? Because they say if a union locks a city into a long-term contract, the city may not be able to afford it down the line. But it's okay for these cities to enter into contracts with private entities, employees that are not collective bargaining, they're contract employees, and give these people golden parachutes, buyouts, which then end up as being stuck up the taxpayers' tuchus. And this is what happens. And the people who want privatization, I'm not saying you're wrong, but you don't want privatization under these circumstances. This contract is too long, the penalties are too high, and that's only one piece, but this is a huge piece. We're talking in excess of $1 million down the road in termination fees. Plus all the legal expenses, because they're going to fight if we try to. So, I mean, look, I'm glad this was filed, and I also heard through the grapevine today, because I was running around before the show, I didn't have a chance to listen. I have been told, and maybe CJ you've heard, I was told by someone that the Teamsters have also filed for a TRO, or are going to file for a TRO. So, temporary restraining order, so, I mean, look, people are upset. And, I know people are going to go, give him a chance. He's trying, we should privatize. Well, I'm not saying we shouldn't, but not privatize under these circumstances. For once, hire somebody that actually knows how to write a contract. Please.
Well, you know, it's interesting, Chip,
And I'm not
because-
looking for a job, by the way.
Yeah.
But the fact is, hire somebody that actually understands contracts, because they don't.
And the savings that they are trying to prove and be in favor of privatization only coming from those employees that's going to lose the jobs, it's not enough to justify this contract.
And
to me.
actually, we had somebody look at this contract, okay, from outside the city, not involved whatsoever, and he figured out that over the term of the contract, it's going to cost us about $15 million more. Okay? So guess what? Because all the savings are put at the front end of the contract to sell it. The problem we have is this. Number one, the thing that the people need to separate from this, whether they want to or not, this is not about privatization. This is what everyone's doing. They say, see, you just don't want them to privatize. I'm all for privatization. This is not about privatization. This is about the law. This is about what rights and privileges this gentleman has as the chief executive officer of the city of Fall River. You don't have the right as the CEO to demand city councils to come in and start dropping the F-bomb every other word. You don't have the right to stand in public and say, I'm going to do this whether people want it or not, and I don't care what the Labor Relations Board says. I'm not going to hire the Teamsters back. You don't have that right. You don't have the right to be a little dictator. And that's what's happening here. The Massachusetts general law is clear. City ordinance is clear. Case law is clear. A contract is only binding upon the mayor if it is not funded by the city council. Therefore, if we get a cancellation clause because of this, I hope the mayor has $798,000 because the city's not paying it.
Well, yeah, well, you know, that's one of the problems we have in the city of Fall River. And you know, I brought it up at my citizens input at the meeting. You know, the city of Fall River seems that they always get up there and say, well, that's not the way we do it in Fall River. Well, as I said it in front of the council, well, we haven't done it very well. Just look at the fiscal condition of Fall River. Instead of doing it Fall River's way, why don't we look at somebody who's doing it right and try to emulate that? And the analogy I use is, look, if you're going to take a golf lesson, don't take it from your friend that can't break 100. You go to a golf professional. And CJ, I don't know the audacity that you had to actually talk about that opinion on this contract from a forensic auditor who didn't have any dog in the fight and did this objectively. So, I mean, the last thing we need to do is talk about laws, because the people in government in the city of Fall River only use the law when they feel it supports them. If it doesn't, they ignore it or try to say our interpretation is different, even if they're wrong. Classic example is Kathy Ann Viveris at the last council meeting saying that the Insurance Advisory Board had the right to change the premium. Number one, it's an advisory board, and the statute 32B clearly states that they have no right to do anything because they're in advisory capacity, and all they can do is offer recommendations, but they never ask for recommendations on the premium. And the other thing is, and I presented the city with some copies of cross-examination by attorney Neil Rossman in the 1991 arbitration on the health care that the city had to pay us back over $1 million, where it stated very clearly, the Insurance Advisory Board, well, that they can't. It's a collective bargaining issue. It's in the contract of every single labor union. In order to change the premium, do anything that affects their pocketbook of those unions, that has to be approved by their bargaining committee. And as the chairman of that committee, the Insurance Advisory Committee, for over 20 years, every time the city would ask me to do something that fell within the purview of collective bargaining, I would remind them, I am here as an Insurance Advisory Board member, not in my capacity as the ex officio chairman of the bargaining committee. And I have a committee that has 6 other people there. And in order for me to approve anything that comes under collective bargaining, I have to have authorization not only from the bargaining committee, it has to go before the body and be voted on. This is the reason, And in case Kathy tries to spin this one around and lie like she did in this instance, all you have to do is look at the health care. Why were the firefighters the last union to accept other health care plans? We stayed with Master Health Plus for about 3 or 4 years when everybody else accepted the alternative plan. The reason was we didn't want to do it, and they couldn't force us to do it because that was a collective bargaining issue. We didn't want to do it to the IAC. Once they introduced that menu, they would ultimately get rid of all the good plans and force everybody into the crappiest plan. And that's what they got now. Unless you live out of state, you can't get a PPO. You got to get stuck in an HMO that fights you on everything. And it's totally inferior to what we had. And, that's the reality. But this city constantly, this taxpayer suit, going to get a lot of heat, but as CJ said, if you're for privatization, this taxpayer suit is not anti-privatization. It's pro-abide by the law. And in and above, if the court decides that he can do it, that still doesn't absolve the city council into looking at this contract and saying it may not be in the best interest of the taxpayers of Fall River financially.
And Chip, we've said this numerous times. I found it amazing that we presented the law very clearly to the city council. We presented it to our viewers in regards to the fact that the city council has the authority to do a line item veto of anything in the budget. And then Joe Macy told the city council, the corporate council, Attorney Joe Macy, that no, you have to vote the budget up or down in full, in the whole thing. Then, when they decided they're not going to approve the budget as the whole thing, it's illegal. They can't do it that way. According to Mary Sahadi, she got a letter from DOR that said, no, it must be done line item by line item. Okay, so there's a second opinion. Then we get a third opinion that says, no, you can only veto the appropriations by department. So who knows the law? Does anyone in Fall River even abide by it? Because we've seen this over and over again.
Yeah. Well, who is the person responsible for making the legal interpretation? Joe Macy.
Right.
Mary Sahadi, the last time I checked, was not Corporation Counsel. And I want to see that letter from DOR.
I requested it today under 6610. I want a copy of the letter. I also requested a copy of the audio because the amazing audio still hasn't been seen. And I'm going to check the metadata on that audio. If it's been edited, I'm going to know. So guess what? I'm going to look at that. I'm not playing this game anymore. That letter, I firmly believe, does not exist. Because guess what? Nobody has seen it.
Not only that, CJ, even if it does exist, Justice Kathy Ann misrepresented what I said in my complaint to DOR. It may have been an answer posed in a different context.
Correct.
So this is the problem. When they only give you half the story, you can't. It's just like reading a law. You can't pick the parts you like. It's got to be the whole law.
I hear you. Believe me. It's amazing how this evening just flies by so fast. But thank you for watching. Have a great weekend and keep tuned because we're going to have more information about this. Stay angry.
Stay angry. Say up the taxpayers.